Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a recent reads where I talk about 10 books that I've recently read and all of my thoughts on them. I'll have content warnings in the description box down below in case that's something that you need, but without further ado, let's talk about 10 books I've recently read and what I thought. So my very first read of the year, and I'm finally read it, and that is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. So this is one of her novels that focuses on a friendship between two characters. One of them is Aled and the other one is Francis. Francis is a big fan of a podcast called Radio Silence, and she draws fan art for this podcast when she discovers that maybe there's more to Aled than she thought, as they form an uncanny friendship, and he confesses that he's the anonymous voice behind Radio Silence. Now, while this book sounds very fandom heavy and quite light-hearted from that synopsis, please be aware that it's actually quite intense, because Aled as a character is going through a lot of emotions, and he has a very strict parent. I think strict is a bit of an understatement, but he doesn't get along well with his mother, and it's severely affecting his mental health. And this is a book that you've got like a female friend and a male friend, but it's not a romance whatsoever. This is a book that is firmly about friendship. It's about queerness, as these characters understand and learn more about their sexuality and love and what they do and don't want in life. And also a lot of this is focusing on the pressure, the academic pressure that teenagers face, the GCSEs and the A-levels and university, and feeling like there's only one way or route or path to live your life. And so this book really explores that in thorough detail as well. I think it did very well with that. I remember the feeling of academic pressure and how constraining it felt as a teenager, and how a lot of your life is spent in school, focusing on school, having those career conversations, and you're just so young and you may not always know what you want to do, and that can be very stressful. So I really appreciated this book as being one that feels like it's a YA that is written specifically for teenagers, and I think teenagers will enjoy this more than I did, because while I still liked it and while I still had a good time reading this, I did at times feel like, oh gosh, these are such young problems, or like problems that teenagers have that I just don't have anymore. And so even as I was reading it and enjoying it and finding it sometimes slow in places, there's nothing I would cut, because I feel like it does bring about everything that it needs to in terms of the themes that it touches for the audience it's going for. I do think the end was quite heartbreaking. There's a lot that goes into it, and it shows the power and the strength and the importance of friendship, especially when friends are going through difficult times. And my heart broke over and over again in those last few chapters, and then was sewn up over and over again as you see the power of friendship and what caring about somebody else can get you to. And so yeah, this was a really lovely book. It is one for the YA readers, but I think they are gonna absolutely adore it, as they have done already. I'm late to this party. I also continued reading one of my series by reading Tokyo Ghoul Volume 6 by Sue Ishida? Yes, by Sue Ishida. So we're quite far into the series with Tokyo Ghoul 6, so I don't know what I can tell you, but this is about, well, generally the whole series is about a world where ghouls exist. Ghouls eat humans, and of course the humans don't like that, so they have their own task force called the CCG, and it's about those two clashing against each other, but it largely focuses on Kaneki, who is half ghoul, half human, one of a kind, and really struggling emotionally and mentally with being of both worlds. And I love this series. It's one of my favorite animes, and I'm now reading it for the first time all the way through, and I'm on volume 6, which puts me at almost halfway, and I did really like this volume as well. A lot happens in this volume that is quite suspenseful and quite tension heavy. There's a large focus on Kaneki and him being in a very difficult situation, and also there's shockers in this one. I think sometimes, you know, with series authors can play it safe and not kill their darlings, but you know, Sue Ishida is not afraid to come in and uproot everything and make you really upset by the outcome of a certain scene. And so I was very, you know, heart in my throat while I was reading the last few chapters of this manga in particular. I still really enjoy the artwork, I still really enjoy the world building and the storyline. We spend more time with some secondary characters that I care less about, and in this one in particular you get a lot of information given to you and injected into you in a way that feels info dumpy, but also I didn't necessarily mind because I needed that information so much. So it was such a relief to get it. I only wish that we had gotten it sooner, but other than the info dumpy chapters, this was another fantastic volume and I continue to look forward to the next volume. I did so well with continuing my series, so the next book I read is A Scar in the Bone by Sophie Jordan. This is the second book and the sequel to A Fire in the Sky. This is a dragon romantasy trilogy. That's really all you need to know about it. It's kind of like a Fourth Wing book but slightly different. I enjoyed this series more than I enjoyed Fourth Wing. Yet I still think this second book might be where I draw the line and stop reading. It's more than I read a Fourth Wing series, so that is still high praise. So in this one you're following our main character and she discovers something about herself and her abilities that she didn't know before. She comes from royalty where she was the whipping girl for the princesses, and in the previous book she loses someone very important to her, and in this one it focuses more on her new environment, a bit of a love triangle situation that has to do with grief and moving on from grief and maybe opening your heart to somebody else, and the plotline continues. There's not much more I can tell you other than that. What I will say about this one is that I was a little bit disappointed in the world building because the first one had set up the world so well, and then this had thrown us into a new layer and a new situation within that world, and I was so ready for the world building to expand. We know that there are more creatures than witches and dragons, and so I wanted to get to know the other creatures, and yet we did not. So I was a bit disappointed with how the world building didn't extend in this particular book. But I really like our main character Tamsin. I think being in her head is such a pleasant place to be. She's responsible, she's mature, she makes such good adult choices, and she's grieving, and it just felt like it was done very well. The fact that she was struggling to move on so much but still really wanted to do it, and every time she makes a choice or a decision I'm like, yes girl, you're making the right choice and the right decision. So I feel very connected to her as a character. I wasn't that interested in the romance storyline that they injected into this one, and this one is a lot less steamy than the first one in the series, and I kind of appreciated that because our main character is grieving, so why would she be engaging in major steamy scenes with other people? So I like that it kept things confined and relevant to this particular story. I don't know where the plot is going next. I just feel like this was not what I expected book 2 to be like. Not that I disliked the direction it went in, but I find this series to be quite difficult to predict or really know what I'm going to get. And this one felt like it didn't really know if it wanted to be more of a fantasy novel or more of a romantasy novel. And so I am confused as well. It was good, I had a nice time, but I don't think I'm going to invest my time into the third book. Lovely. My first 5-star of the year went to Wellwater by Karen Solie. This is a poetry collection and I adored it and I gave it 5 stars. So if you know me, you'll know that I don't typically read nature poetry. You can miss me with that Walt Whitman, you can miss me with the Leaves of Grass. I am not about that life. However, this poetry collection gets a pass because not only is it a nature poetry collection, but it really focuses on the line where the urban meets nature, and I think that's something we can all relate to, especially as people, well, if you are people who live in the city. It explores how we view nature as a retreat and a sanctuary only, and how we don't meet nature where it is. We don't see nature as its own entity that coexists with us on an equal plane. We see it as something over there that we can go to, but we don't interact with on an everyday basis, even though actually we do, no matter where we are. And these poems explore that kind of concept, and I loved the use of metaphor in this. The way that some of these poems are written, Solie could be talking about the cityscape or could be talking about a tree, and both things apply from the way that things are described, and I find that to be incredibly clever. As well as that, I do think what nature poetry often misses is a persona to the poem, character in a poem so that it feels more personal. So rather than just describing the leaves in the fields, you'll be reading a poem about a persona interacting with the leaves in the fields and having an emotional reaction to a memory there. And because of that, it pulls us into the nature poem. It brings us along with it, so we are also interacting with the emotions and the space and the memories. And I really liked that these nature poems had a sense of persona, had a sense of the urban, and just had a sense of how all of that merges together. It was beautifully written, beautifully done. I can see the skill and the talent in the literary devices used, every word, every line, every break, every space. It was all so intentional and also well done. Hats off to Karen Solie. I can see why this has currently been winning all of the poetry awards, because it absolutely deserves it. So after this point, most of the books I'm going to talk about have been in a vlog before, so if you have seen all of my vlogs you might not want to keep on watching, but some people are just here for my recent reads video or want to know my final thoughts, so please continue watching if you'd like that. So the next book I've got to talk about is Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy, and this is what the final cover looks like. This is a literary book about a student who falls in love with her professor, and she is half his age. So of course this is dealing with grooming and also having relationships that are inappropriate with minors, much to the similar topic of My Dark Vanessa. What I have to say about this book though is that I just found it okay. I loved I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy, which was a non-fiction memoir, very different to this, and so I was curious to see what her writing would be like in a story like this. However, I found the story to be a bit repetitive. Our main character's actions were quite repetitive, and I just don't think this story added anything to this topic. It doesn't really talk about the trauma that such a relationship can give this teenager, because it's from the teenager's perspective. And when it comes to topics like this, I really like when it shows or like highlights the fact that the older person is in the wrong. And don't get me wrong, this book is showing that the professor is the one who's in the wrong. It very clearly and distinctly shows this. However, I still feel like it gave the teenage character a bit too much control of the situation, or too much a feeling of control, when really it's not her responsibility, it's not in her control to control this situation. And that could be seen by some people as like good writing and a credit to this story, because that's the false feeling that the character gets, but it just didn't really unblur that line enough for me. I wanted it to be more clear, more stark, more distinctive on that front. I will say that the writing is very pacey and easy to read, kind of like a thriller. It goes for the short sentences, it goes for the direct descriptions, it's not too flowery or anything, and so because it has short chapters, short sentences, and isn't overly wordy, I whizzed through this. I could quickly and easily read it. However, I just can't stop thinking that My Dark Vanessa did what this book was trying to do so much better and brought across its themes in a more effective way, and at the end it just kind of finished and I was a bit unsatisfied with where the book stopped. So that's what I thought of Half His Age. We are now halfway through the vlog, so I need to say a massive thank you to my patrons, my wonderful patrons who support my channel. And if you would like to hear my thoughts on Hell's Heart by Alexis or Made Things by Adrian Tchaikovsky, please head over to my Patreon. There is a Patreon exclusive wrap up where I share my review thoughts of these two. So the next book I need to talk about is The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. This is the second book in the Bridgerton series. Again, I really am reading my sequels in this recent wrap-up. This is following Kate and Anthony. Kate is an older stepsister who is entering into the town for the first time, and she is primarily there to help her younger sister get married to the richest person, but also to somebody who is truly going to love her. She's not that interested in finding romance for herself. Quinn Anthony Bridgerton, he is the oldest of the Bridgerton family, the son and the heir, and he has decided it's high time that he gets married and starts continuing on his legacy. However, he does not want to fall in love, he just wants to find somebody who is worthy. And that is where our romance book starts. I found this an absolute delight to read. I really enjoyed it. We've got a strong dislike to lovers, dynamic, and I think this book pulled it off superbly. I really believed and understood why Kate and Anthony did not like each other. They both had such opposing goals and wants, and yet they could not stop their endearment for each other from growing and growing and growing, regardless of the sticky situations that they end up in, and that just brought me immense joy, and I kept laughing and smiling. They end up in so many silly situations that had me giggling out loud while I was reading, which was very impressive, and yet at the same time it still managed to bring that sense of romance. And also, while having their romance at the forefront, we do delve into storylines that tackle grief and distortion of thoughts and expectations because of the fact that you are grieving and haven't been able to get over it. It also touched a lot on responsibility and what it means to kind of secure the future for your family and to have that weight constantly sitting on your shoulders. And it also delves into a lot of the side characters. I loved getting to see Kate and her sister's dynamic, and I always love getting to see the messy antics that the big Bridgerton family get up to as well. But in this one, I think what does stand out is seeing such a lovely and loving stepmother-stepdaughter relationship, which I just don't get to see that often. This was truly a delight wrapped in a book, and I'm looking forward to reading the third installment in the series. Tiffany D. Jackson has yet to steer me wrong, and that still stands for reading The Scammer by Tiffany D. Jackson. So this is a upper young adult horror novel where we're following our main character. She has deferred from her fancy university to go to an all-black school to study instead, and when she gets there she's trying her best to fit in. She is put into a room with 4 other black girls and she's finally making black female friends. She's so excited, but then one of the girls has their ex-convict brother move into their dorm room, and as soon as he does, things start getting weird, things start getting strange, and maybe things even start getting just a bit scary. This was absolutely fantastic. It scared me to no end. When I read horror, I don't often get scared because supernatural horror doesn't do it for me, but psychological, very realistic horror absolutely does. And this one has a lot to do with cult behaviors, and I have to hand it to Tiffany D. Jackson. I had to keep turning those pages. I needed to know what would happen next. I needed to know if these girls are going to be okay, and I needed that page to turn every single time. So if you don't mind being scared by something that's very realistic and can happen, in fact has happened, because this is based on a true story. I'll leave a link to the article down below if you're interested. I recommend reading the book first and then reading the article. But yeah, it was really, this book got me messed up. This book got me messed up, I have to say. That said, I really liked our characterization. I really felt for our main character. I really understood every choice that she made. And I also really like that this book does focus on the fact that she is a black female woman living in the US, and it does tackle and touch on things like racism. It does talk about police brutality. It does talk about riots. And so even in this book that's really talking about race in a very complicated way, and culture in a very complicated way, because it really tackles a specific element of black culture that I can't tell you without giving anything away. It handles these very complex and sensitive conversations expertly well, and I think you can't misconstrue Tiffany D. Jackson's point from reading this book, and that's impressive. That's impressive because this book is talking and touching on a lot. Underneath all of that stress and horror, there is also a romance going on, and the romance was really cute. So I was feeling horrified and scared, and it was very intense, and then it would touch on like the cute romance that's going through this, and I was just like, oh, that's so cute. And I really shipped this couple together. The way that they acted when they were together was just so romantic, and both of them had things to work through and develop through to make their romance work alongside the whole plot that's going on. And I just think Tiffany D. Jackson managed to pull off a thread of joy and happiness in what could otherwise be a very grim book to make it quite balanced. Pretty well. So the next one I have to talk about is Dominion by Addie E. Citchens, and this is a literary fiction book set in a small town that has a mega church in it. And so it's talking about the toxicity of mega churches from the perspective of 2 women, and looking at the women who love the men who are big figures within the megachurch. So we're following a mother to a son who is married to the reverend of the church, and then we're also following the girlfriend to the son of the reverend. And this is a 200-page book that packs a whole punch. I really appreciate and admire books that manage to tackle subjects around faith incredibly well, and this one really unpacks church culture, some of the toxicity around church culture, but especially a lot around purity culture and the concept of boys will be boys, which is something that really needs to be addressed, not only within the church space but across the grid as well. And by choosing the two perspectives that it does, it manages to be very upfront and direct about its themes, but it also manages to actually thread them into a story and a narrative. And this is one of my favourite things, because I struggle to find literary fiction that is, literary and thematic and character driven, and yet still has a very good sense of plot threaded through it. And this has that in spades, because not only is the characterization good, and I really loved the depiction of these two black women who are in very different sides of the society. One is quite poor, one is richer, and you hear from their perspective and you believe in them and you want the best for them, but at the same time you cannot predict what is going to happen, because once I thought this was a gentle plot, about 50 to 100 pages in, it picks up the pace and it throws unexpected directions at me that I just did not foresee coming, and my jaw was literally on the floor. I had to keep turning the pages because I had to know how this book was going to finish. And by the end of it, I was incredibly satisfied with where we landed. I felt like everybody who needed to get some comeuppance or some form of punishment or some form of consequences did manage to get that, but at what cost? At what cost did we land where we landed at the end of this novel? I think it's fascinating. I like how it did talk about faith and how faith can be a good thing and a strong thing, but also how it can be weaponized and used in a way that is not good as well. So this tackled quite a lot. I unfortunately really did not enjoy my experience reading Hello Limerence by Momo Yamaguchi. So this is a book about limerence. We're following a woman who lives in Japan. She is 20 something. She's got nothing going for her. She's working a dead-end job with lots of misogyny in the office, and she meets a guy and she is enamored with him, and for the first time he possibly actually fancies her back. Is this a crush or is this limerence? That is what this book is about. Now, it's not that long, but I felt like I was reading it forever. My biggest struggle with this was the fact that our characters' actions were so repetitive, which means we are reading the same things happening again and again and again. Now, this may be accurate because that's what you do when you're experiencing limerence. You're obsessed. You can't get past it. You're even tiring yourself out by how on a loop you are obsessing over this person. But still, I got exhausted reading this narrative and those cycles happening again and again and again. I also wanted this to just feel more set in Japan, because that was part of the reason why I picked it up, and yet it could be set anywhere for all the descriptions that we get, for all the lifestyle elements that we get. It really could have been set anywhere, and that's not a big element of the story. So I was quite disappointed in the fact that we aren't really grounded in setting. The storyline that we're getting is repetitive, and I don't even really like our main character anyway. I didn't feel for her. Mostly I just wanted to shake her and move her on to something better. But yeah, by the end of it, it goes in an interesting direction, but I still wasn't quite satisfied in the end, and I just have to admit that I was mostly bored and reading this with me waiting for it to finish. So wasn't one for me. Yet don't fear, we are ending this recent reads on a high, because I also read The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School by Sonora Reyes, and I absolutely loved this and I gave it a 5-star. This is a new favourite for me. It's a YA book where we're following Yamilet. She is a sister to a brother. She's with her mother. Her father has been deported back to Mexico, and she's starting afresh at Catholic school after she was outed by her best friend at her previous school. And so what she's doing is trying to pretend to be straight so that she can get through her school year. However, at Catholic school there is one out and proud girl, and Yamilet can't help but feel something and start to crush on her. So that's what this book is about. I will say that it's about so much more than this, but I absolutely loved how it handled everything and anything that this book touched on. A big theme is obviously queerness and faith. It did the queer representation fantastically. Yamilet is not the only queer character that you meet. There's a bunch of secondary characters who are having their own storylines as well, and I really felt for all of these characters and their journeys. And this book emphasized what it means to be queer as a teenager and how much really depends on that coming out moment. Your safety, your house, your school, your belief, and how your parents will react. That is a whole load of weight to be carrying, and this book really shows how much weight that is to carry on a teenage shoulder. It also really looked at faith, especially because her mum is very staunchly Catholic and she's at a Catholic school. So there are a lot of discussions around faith and queerness and people who think they don't intersect and people who are allies and faithful at the same time and practicing religion at the same time. And I really appreciated how this book showed both sides of the coin, that you can be an ally and a believer, but also what it's like when you are someone who's religious. You need to really show that you can be an ally, that you are an ally, because otherwise maybe people don't think that of you. It has some very hard discussions around faith, especially internalized homophobia and religious trauma, so be aware and be prepared for that. But I think this book handled all of those topics incredibly well. I mean, its own voices for the queer representation, so of course it's going to handle them very well, but I was very, very impressed by how big a scope that this could tackle. It touches on the fact that our characters are brown and Mexican and what the racism is like that she faces, but also there are so many elements of celebrating Mexican culture in this as well, and I do really like that it touches on that, as well as the realities of living as a Mexican in the US, especially today. It's very relevant to today as well. Please check your content warnings for this, because there's quite a big moment that does need content warnings. This is for people who are queer reading it or people who are not queer reading it. You still should check the content warnings. The biggest content warning that you need will be the very first one in my description box down below. And as well as that, I will say that this book, it's tackling a lot of heavy stuff and a lot of big conversations, and yet it still manages to have a storyline of love and a storyline of hope threaded through it. And so at the end, I was just an emotional wreck, because I was feeling such happy feelings and I was so proud of everything that these teenagers have come through, and yet there was still an element of sadness. Not every sub-storyline in this ends happily. Not all of them end badly, but that doesn't mean all of them end happily either. It's really painting the realities that life can have good things, it can have bad things, and it can have all of those other range of emotions in between. I adored it, and I have discovered that there is a second book from a different character's point of view, and I cannot wait to read that as well. So there you have it. Those are the 10 books that I've recently read and all of my thoughts on them. Please let me know in the comment section down below, what was the last book that you read and what did you think of it? Let me know if you read any of these books or plan to. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!